Right now, today, folks, I'm going to be covering this very, very important case of Cameron Wilson. There's a lot of things we can take away from this that are very important to learn, also as life lessons. And in some ways, they kind of relate to similar cases of the bygone era, such as the Jonestown incident, which happened, and also the serious situations that occurred in Salem, Oregon, with the people there, who ingested poison, apparently. It's always very important to learn from these experiences and take away what we can, so enjoy it. This is the case of Cameron Wilson in West High Cape, South Africa. Thank you again. So today we're going to be covering this very interesting case, and this is a case I'm extremely interested in looking into in depth. I've been looking forward to it for a while, so this will be a little bit different than recent cases. I'm heavily invested in this. This is a case that took place with a South African male suspect. And this took place several times in several different areas as well. It's the case of 21-year-old Cameron Wilson, who was officially found guilty of 5 counts of murder, attempted murder, RP, and illegal possession of a firearm in the commission of an act. Every single case covered how police carried out their duties diligently, it says. In the 2016-2017 financial year, courts managed to obtain 166 convictions. Basically, what it's saying here is they managed to obtain 321,166 convictions, with a 94.1% conviction rate. Furthermore, the regional courts have maintained a successful conviction rate of 79.8% over the past decade. In the first episode, we hear gruesome details of how 21-year-old Cameron Wilson was found guilty of 5 counts of murder, attempted murder, RP, and illegal possession of firearm in commission of acts, and unlawful actions. Wilson's killing spree started when he was 17 years old. He killed his victims in the most brutal of methods. One of his victims, an 18-year-old, was named Lakita Moore. She was stabbed 98 times. Viewers learn how the horrific crime unfolded, and the subsequent trial also concludes. We wanted unique cases and cases that would appeal to South Africa. Not only RP or murder, but all types of cases. The series was shot at the actual crime scene. So, I'm going to be covering this more in depth as we examine how Lakita Moore was killed by Cameron Wilson. And I'm going to share some very important details, which for some reason I'm supposed to cover, which you need to get out there. You need to get these out there far and wide, because there's more things that need to be resolved about this criminal case. And there are more loose ends that have to be tied up. Thank you. The case of Cameron Wilson is highly disturbed. Wilson was convicted in June on 13 charges, 5 murders at minimum, RP, possession of a firearm and the discharge of the ammunition, assault, conspiracy, and 3 counts of attempted murder. He was acquitted on 2 as judgment proceedings continued for 3 whole entire days. Cameron Wilson received 4 life terms. And just imagine that, folks. This is somebody who should have been just sentenced for 20 years. Instead, he received 4 life terms, which is basically 20 years times 4, for the murders of Toyher Stober, Stacy Lee Mohale, Lakita Moore, and for the RP of Donnie Davids. He was handed 15 years for the murder of Alfonso Van Ruyen, 5 years for possession of an unlicensed firearm and ammunition, and 15 for the murder of Ernest Erasmus. There were other crimes as well. 10 years for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit the commission of the offense. 6 years for aggravated assault with intent to commit grievous bodily injury. And 10 years for the murder also of Rosalind Lackey. The young first-time offender is allegedly the son of a prominent 2-8 gangster who himself was charged with more than 3 murders. Cameron Wilson also joined the notorious gang while behind bars and now sports a 28-inch tattoo on his right hand. On Thursday, a disinterested-looking Cameron Wilson laughed and then yawned while he stretched and rolled his eyes at Judge Chantal Fortuyn, who read out the sentence in a packed Western Cape High Court. The gallery was filled with friends and family of the victims. They hurled abuse and taunted Cameron Wilson. He will be eligible for parole in 25 years. As far as I'm concerned, folks, he's not going to be eligible for parole ever, which is ultimately a good outcome as well. A psychopath. Psychologists who examined Cameron Wilson during his 51-day trial and sentencing submitted reports to the official court that declared Wilson was a serial killer and a known psychopath with very limited chances of being rehabilitated. Eric Natbazalia stated for the court. Prosecutor advocate Carlene Tunison said Cameron Wilson showed no remorse or empathy to his victims. There were substantial and compelling reasons for the court to deviate from the prescribed minimum sentence. He was cruel. The crimes he committed were gruesome beyond any kind of compare. He disrespected women as well and enjoyed manipulating them, and any who defied him, including men. She applauded the over 40 witnesses who bravely took the stand during Cameron Wilson's official trial, saying they played a very pivotal role in the case. We know that some of them were threatened, but they risked their own lives to ensure that the victims of crime got the justice that was required. There's never been a more heinous murderer in a long time than what was discovered with Cameron Wilson. And it's amazing to see that people like this flew under the radar for a long time. The 21-year-old was sentenced on Thursday to 4 life sentences, and the sentences will run concurrently for Cameron Wilson. Western Cape Police Commissioner Lieutenant General Kamukasi Hula praised the team from police detectives in the state prosecutor's office for removing Cameron Wilson from the streets after a series of murders, RP, and assault committed by him as a teenager between 2014 and 2016. Arresting suspects is one thing, but ensuring they remain behind bars is something altogether different, and that ensures the criminal justice system is doing what it's supposed to. Wilson was convicted in June on 13 charges. He was acquitted only on 2 as the judgment proceedings continued for 3 days. Hence, he was handed 15 years for the murder of Alfonso Van Ruyen, 5 years for possession of an unlicensed firearm. So, folks, this guy was just horrible. And there are a number of key lessons we can all learn from the case of Cameron Wilson. Was he like this when first starting out? It seems in some cases he was. And it's just unbelievable to think he murdered more than 3 men and at least 4 or more women in a bid to basically outdo John Gotti. And this guy didn't even look like a professional gangster. He looked, he looked like a scrub. He looked like someone who should never have even been on the streets. And so there's going to be a lot that we can take away from this. And there's going to be a lot that people need to learn from this type of case and from all the circumstances that occurred around this. He was trafficking all these substances. And how did he get out there? Who allowed him to get out there on the scene in such a way? When this guy's only 21 years old, that makes no sense. Somebody was enabling him. We're going to find out why. That's right. We now know exactly why that is, why it contributed to the aggressive nature. The national prosecutor said the state called more than 40 witnesses for this conviction. Witnesses in our area were not safe, so it wasn't easy for any of them to come forward. Lindhorst stated Moore's parents have welcomed the sentence, but a gruesome death has been painful for them to deal with. Charles Moore, who was Lakita's father, continues to grieve for the daughter and other victims. This is the start of the healing process and for them to get closure. Western Cape Provincial Commissioner Lieutenant General Kambukausi praised both the investigation and prosecution teams for the job that they did. Arresting suspects is one thing, but ensuring they remain behind bars and pay their dues sends a strong message that the criminal justice system is working. So, in this case, this is one of those specific instances where the criminal justice system of South Africa did exactly what it's supposed to. Because it was caught on physical audio and physical video camera. Okay, folks? That Cameron Wilson was stabbing these people. They actually showed it on camera. And Xavier Besca was there. He was his accomplice. But we didn't see anything about what Xavier Besca was doing. We didn't see any of these claims by Cameron Wilson that he jumped up on the victims and started stabbing. We didn't see anything like that. We saw him assisting Cameron Wilson. So, and then we saw 2 women, his mother and we saw someone else, directly covering for this horrific crime. So why, indeed, folks, it's a good question to ask sometimes. Why did Cameron Wilson claim that he was being followed by a gang and they were the ones who murdered these people when it's been shown on video camera that he literally stabbed these people to death? It's a good commentary. It's something that we do need to examine. I will tell you one thing. I believe that this is the result of the psychological disorder that the prosecution and the psychiatrist has brought up before of borderline. That a person who does such a horrific crime, like what Cameron Wilson is guilty of doing, will intentionally make up a counter-narrative, entirely make-believe narrative, to hide from their own trauma from having committed that crime. And this is something very important to remember, because he was smiling and smirking on the actual camera in the courts and even outside the courthouse, claiming that the neighborhood wanted to set him up, and he was smiling and laughing about it. So this shows the level of depravity that was inside his mind and inside the disorder that he had. Nobody ever does something like this. But Cameron Wilson was very, very pleased with the results of what he had done with stabbing these people. And so it's very important to be able to discern these things. It's interesting because there's been other crimes that have happened since, but nothing as horrific and in your face as what occurred in the Cameron Wilson case. Really. That's very interesting. It's a fascinating case, and it's a good case study, because what it tells us is that borderline disorder is very serious. It's extremely extremely real. The effects that it has on someone is extremely literal and extremely real. And what it leads someone to do sometimes is beyond horrifying. And more than that, what he was also doing, you know, aside from that, he was robbing people. He was actually physically robbing people. Now, he claimed Xavier Besca is who was robbing people. We don't ever know the truth of that, because Xavier is spotted on camera helping him at several different places, but he isn't ever the one who goes up to people and steals from them. But he claims, of course, to this day that his pal, who ended up dying shortly after, Xavier Besca, is who was doing the actual robberies. So, someone who is in this kind of situation, folks, will literally make up an alternative reality that is complete make-believe in order to hide from what they have done. That's one of the horrifying things that we need to be aware of, for sure. And we need to recognize and understand somebody like Cameron Wilson cannot be rehabilitated. This guy was 21 years old when he ended up stabbing and killing more than 7 people. Attempted to kill more than 7 people. Wilson smirked once they entered the courtroom. When Sibda asked why Wilson denied the allegations, he lashed out once again. She refuted Wilson's claims and stuck with the initial testimony. And in this case, all of the claims, besides what they showed on the actual video camera, were false. So this was an unusual case. I mean, it's happened before, but you don't see this very often, where a suspect will make up an entirely different, alternate series of events and history to cover for their horrific crimes. But that's what Wilson did. Before leaving the courtroom, an angry Lakay shouted at Wilson. So this is someone who definitely is very disturbed, and it's proof that there are people out there who are broken. They are totally broken psychologically, and they are broken inside. Spiritually, if you want to call it that. They are broken to the point of there is absolutely no way to rehabilitate someone like that. And I would hazard to say, folks, that this applies to Cameron Wilson, but it also applies to Hillary Clinton. So we have to be very, very careful, and we have to be aware. Serial killer and convicted RP Cameron Wilson, age 21, claps and taunts victims' families as he is jailed 71 years for all charges. Cameron Wilson is the profile of a sociopath. In other words, he has an unusual characteristic that we don't see frequently in these cases. He is an official psychopath. And what that means, folks, is he has done these types of actions many, many times in his life. Even though he is, age 21, he's done this more than at least 5 separate times in his already very, very limited life. He has conducted these crimes. And he says, again, when he goes into court, he says, "At least I'm still alive." It says serial killer and RP Cameron Wilson, as he is sentenced in the Western Cape High Court in Midtown, South Africa. Cameron Wilson stabbed his target, Lakita Moore, 98 times. That's right, folks. 98 times in a row. If this was just some kind of simple altercation, they had an argument that something was going on, Cameron Wilson wouldn't have ended up stabbing the victim 98 times. So this is, already, when you really get into it, this is an unusual situation which is not explained by them just having an argument. There was many things going on here in this case, and some of them are certainly going to be covered in here. Cameron, age 21, was found guilty of 5 murders, RP, and 7 charges, yet he clapped and taunted the families of each of the victims. When he was sentenced to life, meaning 4 life sentences and 71 years in prison, this monster repeatedly smiled and then laughed at the victims. Cameron Wilson, RP'd, stoned and set ablaze a teenager in a horrific attack within Midtown, South Africa. Family members of his victims called for him never to see his own family again. And if I had been there in that court, folks, I would have called I would call the bailiff and ask that he never see the light of day, to be honest. Because this is really a quite disturbing case. We do not see cases that are this severe often. This is a rare situation, but it's also a very disturbed case, and it deserves to have each of its details covered in depth. Wilson could be seen smiling, giggling, and slouching while he was in the court's main seat in front of the jury. Wilson received 4 life terms for the murders of Toyher Stober, Stacy Lee Mohali, Lakita Moore, age 18, and the RP of Donnie Davids. The serial killer, Cameron Wilson, RP'd also 16-year-old Stacy Lee Mohali, stoned, and then set her body on fire. So again, folks, I reiterate, if this was in fact a normal case, the behavior that is exhibited here and many other areas of the courtroom would not have been seen. This was clearly a case where the suspect had premeditated these crimes and was intentional in what he was doing for altogether different reasons than they claim in the newspaper articles. He knew that he was going to kill Stacy Lee Mohali and these other victims, just because he did not like them, he did not appreciate something they said. It had nothing to do with anything that's reiterated in the newspaper articles, and absolutely nothing to do with what the magazine said it did. He killed these victims for altogether different reasons, ulterior motives, That's why this is a very important case to cover, and we will indeed cover it in depth. He was handed 15 years for the murder of Alfonso von Ruyan, 15 years for the murder of Ernest Erasmus, 10 years for the murder of Rosalind Lackey, and others. Clearly there was someone else as well that he was attempting to murder, if you look in the docket. Cameron Wilson laughed at the mention of his very last two murders and rolled his eyes when he heard the life sentences called out on camera. He will also serve 5 years for possession of unlicensed firearm and discharge in commission of such, 6 years for assault with intent to commit grievous bodily harm, and RP. Cameron Wilson clapped during the court sentencing for his 5 brutal RPs and murders. He was taunting the Western Cape High Court Judge Chantal Fortuyn after she was sentencing him to a total of 71 years. A sick serial killer who RP'd and stabbed his final victim 98 times clapped in court as he was sent to prison. In a vile attack on the families of those Cameron Wilson targeted, he said loudly, "At least I'm still alive," in a voice dripping with sarcasm. He was found guilty in a South African high court of 13 of the charges, including the 5 murders, 1 RP, and 3 attempted murders. There he is. And he's clapping and laughing at everybody, saying, "At least I'm still alive." So the only thing that he cared about, at least it seems that way when you start really studying this case in depth, is that he got away with the murders, or that he got away with them for a while. Keep in mind, this kid, who you could definitely say is a kid, is only 20 years old, and at this time he's 21, after being put before, the high court. And yet, while he was listening to his fate, he clapped and cheered on his murders. Among the 5 people he killed were his final victim, Lakita Moore, 16-year-old Stacy Lee Mohale, who was also stoned and set on fire, and Toyer Stober, as well as Donnie Davids, and someone else. He was handed 15 years for the murder of Alfonso von Ruyan, 15 years for the murder of Ernest Erasmus, 10 years for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit a crime, and 6 years for assault with intent to commit grievous bodily injury on Rosalind Lackey. When these 2 murders were mentioned, he laughed and rolled his eyes. So, this is quite unusual. This snake, came out of the same grass that produced Brian Laundrie and similar things. This is someone who was so obsessed with his crimes. And he's only 20 years old. He's only really 21 years old. Keep this fact in mind, folks. That he wore a Nike jacket and he laughed openly in the court multiple times at the crimes that he committed. And this is just the start of this, because there's more that really needs to be covered on this. But this was heinous. Absolutely heinous. And clearly, the only thing he was interested in was the fact that he felt at the time he had gotten away with more than 5 murders. Well, I'll tell you this, folks. He wasn't laughing at all once he got placed in the federal penitentiary. At that point, he was literally on his knees for good reason. He wasn't laughing anymore after that. More to come. The Lavis Community Police Forum says residents in Valhalla Park are relieved that the murderer, Cameron Wilson, now spends the rest of his life behind bars. Speaking to VOC, CPF chairperson Graham Lindhorst says the stiff sentence handed down to Wilson sent a strong message to perpetrators. Wilson was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences or 71 years for all murders, RP, and charges on Thursday. Onlookers in the Park Public Gallery broke out into applause, and I don't agree with that. I don't think anybody should celebrate anything when anyone gets murdered. Doesn't matter who. I don't think anybody should ever celebrate that at all. And here's the reason why I say that, folks. If you celebrate that, it doesn't matter whether you think it's positive or negative. If you celebrate something like that, you are inviting murder into your home. You are inviting that to come back to your home state eventually. So I don't think it should be ever celebrated. I think it's very solemn, and it's the right thing that they are now behind bars for good. Residents are happy with the verdict. As a community, we feel it's a strong message sent out and a positive step. Wilson was arrested in September last year after the mutilated corpse of 18-year-old Lakita Moore was found in Valhalla Park. Her mutilated naked corpse was discovered in an open field where she had been stabbed 98 times in a row. At the time, he was out on bail for the murder of 16-year-old Stacy Lee Mohale. Throughout the trial, Cameron Wilson showed no remorse. On Thursday, he clapped and smiled at Western Cape High Court Judge Chantel Fortua. Professor Sean Kaliski, the foreign psychiatrist who assessed the accused, described Wilson as a psychopath in danger. While it's been reported that Wilson came from a loving home, the defense asked the court to consider the potential negative impact that his father had. Wilson's father is an alleged gang member who is currently imprisoned and involved in a triple homicide in Bishop Lavie. So this is interesting, folks, because when you look into the specifics of the case of Cameron Wilson, he claims many times that it was actually someone else by the name of Besca, a friend of actually Cameron Wilson's, who he claims shot and killed these people. However, it's been confirmed from an eyewitness camera that he was seen smiling and stabbing some of these victims, and that Besca, his friend, was also there as his accomplice. So this is the level of lies and the level of depravity that is truly in certain people like Cameron Wilson. He had his mother cover it up, cover the story up, even though he was shown on camera actually stabbing someone. He made it seem like everyone was trying to come after Cameron Wilson, and he blamed all of the murders on his friend, who, because we do not see the actual camera footage at this point, we do not know at this time whether or not he actually was just killed at random, or whether Cameron Wilson had his friend Xavier Besca killed. So this is very, very educational. This is very important to witness everything about what happened here. The defense believed that his exposure to gangsterism at an early age was a contributing factor to his... And we want to keep a very, very close eye out there for the signs, the warning signs of somebody like these people. The literal red flags and warning signs for how sinister these people truly are. Wilson was found guilty of the murders of Alfonso von Ruyen, Toyer Staber, etc. Abigail Platagius was one of his victims who survived. During the trial, she told the court of the terror she experienced with her 16-year-old friend, Stacy Mohale. On April 21st, 2015, the two girls were walking home, and on their way back, they were approached by Wilson and a younger man. Wilson led them to a nearby field at gunpoint where he RP'd Stacy, and he then hit and stabbed them and threw tires over their corpse or over their body before setting them ablaze and on fire. So after he was finished stabbing them numerous times, he then threw actual rubber tires of some kind over their body and their corpse and lit them all on fire, burning them all right there in the field so that they all burned up. That's correct. Stacy did not survive. Abigail survived with serious injuries. Deemed a psychopath and danger to society by forensic psychiatrist Professor Sean Kaliski, Wilson appeared unmoved by the years behind bars. He is now facing consecutive life sentences. And he was sentenced to 4 life terms for a total of 71 years. The sentences will run concurrent, and we will see as they are considered to be open for parole 25 years from now. He won't be open for parole anymore. I mean, this is unbelievable. And this is quite the testament to what really happens with some of these psychopaths. Big time. Wilson seemed bored, at times shaking his head and smirking. Outside court, Lakita Moore's father said he cried every night. She was everything to me, and we must have justice for everything that happened, and how I feel after this. Family members of the victims celebrated. One poster read, "After today, you will not be laughing." And they were correct about that. Once he was finally put permanently behind bars, his smirk was wiped off his face. The family of victims and community members celebrate the heavy sentence given to murderer and serial killer Cameron Wilson by the Western Cape High Court. It's just really tragic. And we see this all too often with certain people who it's obvious from the get-go. The signs are there that they are psychopaths. And we need people who are trained officially to spot the psychopath before it actually strikes. That's right. It's terrible to ponder what other victims he has and what other victims his accomplice has, because those aren't the only people that Cameron Wilson, finished off. Folks, those are not the only people. You understand that. He finished off many more. They just haven't found their bodies yet. That's correct. And it's disturbing. When you think about it overall, it is truly disturbing. And it makes sense that we need to review cases like this a lot closer. And we need to look into them much, much more. And determine certain things about these cases, so we can understand what's truly going on. That's correct. Her father, Charles Moore, said it's hard dealing with how his daughter and so on was senselessly murdered. Every night when I get home and look at the pictures of my child, the tears roll down. Wilson faces 15 charges. Of course, he got convicted for the 13 charges. But clearly, and I'll say it right now, because there's more that needs to be reviewed about this investigation. Clearly, Cameron Wilson has a few more skeletons in his closet than just these victims. And that's what I'm officially going to say on this, because once again, you can't make up what he did. And he set all of their bodies literally on fire after killing them. So there's more victims out there of this maniac. We must hope and certainly pray all the more that those victims get found, so they get laid at the feet of Cameron Wilson once again. That's right. This was him. This was Mr. Wilson. Mr. Charles Mr. Cameron Wilson himself, right here. And we can see that nothing really was learned from this, meaning he just kept smiling, apparently. And this is the type of thing that needs to go away. That's why we have now reclaimed American justice system, is to ensure things like this do not happen anymore at all. And you know, the more and more I look at this, you know, I feel for the family. I have to really feel for what happened with Lakita Moore. You know, you look at people like this, you look at people like Bernie Madoff and so on, who are now long gone. They're no longer with us. But you look at people like this, and they enjoy. There's a certain level of them that enjoys what they do. These serious, serious crimes. And, you know, you wonder if somebody like this, like a Cameron Wilson, would ever truly be able to change. And to be honest, I do not believe that that is the case. There are some people, and we just have to be very, very honest about this. There are some people that are pure evil, in a way. And the way that he smiles and he laughs at everyone, you know, long after all of these people have been reported deceased, is quite interesting. Because then we see when Cameron Wilson goes into prison, permanently winds up behind bars. And there are some people who are petitioning for something else to occur too, for sure. It's fascinating. You see the way their face, you see the face of someone like this entirely change, shift overnight to being truly beyond horrified that that's where they're going to be the rest of their lives, and they're not ever coming out. And it's sad too, because there are a lot of people out there, much more than we ever suspected, who have the similar mentality and motives as Cameron Wilson had, and had that same day all of these just atrocious crimes occurred. So thank you again. It's very tough sometimes having to face, you know, the truth of what goes on. We'll be able to restore things to how they're supposed to be. More and more people recognize who the Cameron Wilsons of our world have been, and recognize the types of things they've done. Cape Town, Africa. Multiple murder accused defendant Cameron Wilson was found guilty by a full jury for killing 5, including 18-year-old Lakita Moore in Valhalla Park, near the Cape High town, inside the Cape High Court. Wilson was on trial for the past 4 months for all of the aggravated murders and attempted murders, to include 13 of the 15 most serious felonies. He was arrested officially in September after Lakita Moore's body was uncovered at a crime scene nearby. The public gallery was filled to capacity as relatives of Wilson's victims listened intensely to Chantel Fortuyn's verdict. Fortuyn found Wilson guilty of all murders, including Alfonso von Ruyen, Toyer Stober, and Ernest Erasmus in 2014. Cameron Wilson was found guilty of the attempted murders also of Nicole McCowan, Rosaline Lakay, and one other. McCowan was stabbed in the back, while Lakay sustained multiple wounds to her head, face, and also legs and abdomen. Wilson was convicted of the illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition in connection and commission with the act. Wilson was convicted for the killing of Lakita Moore in Valhalla Park in the same exact area, and the killing and attempted murder of Stacy Leahy Mohali and Abigail Platagius in April of 2015. The judge ruled that the state did not prove beyond reasonable doubt that Cameron Wilson stabbed Cody Philander in 2015 and could not prove that he RP'd the other victim. Of course, later it was proven that this indeed occurred. Unfortunately, he also created several different social media accounts. He broadcast video worldwide with official claims that said that this group was after him and that they had murdered Lakita Moore, and also tried to murder Nicole McCowan and so on. The interesting part about this is all of his social media accounts where he made all of these different claims provided no actual evidence and no physical evidence that anyone could see, and video camera footage still to this day showed him stabbing these victims. So this was a very interesting case. It is clear that he did kill them, and that Xavier Besca was one of the accomplices that also apparently later was taken out. And it's just a very, very tragic case. You have to feel for the family that was involved in this and all the victims, because, of course, the way that he disposed of everyone was quite sinister. And you know, I maintain to this day that there's certainly more that needs to come about for certain crimes like this, no question. But the way that it ended and what happened to Ruyan and Toyer Stober are definitely some serious situations that we should never forget. And my condolences go out to Lakita Moore's family especially, and Toyer Stober, as well as Ernest Erasmus and others who were senselessly taken. Their lives were taken by Cameron Wilson and any of his accomplices who worked with this young man. Age 21. All these things occurred. And it's always interesting. The second case we will be looking at will have some parallels, will have some similarities. But I want people to recognize, you know, it's just the truth. There's some people out there who truly have nothing but very evil intent. And these were some of those. And there's a lot that people will be able to take away, and they will ultimately be able to learn from these specific scenarios. So thank you again. 2014 and 2015, those were quite interesting years in history.